We're back, friends, still on Thursday Night Chat. We are coming to you live via Phil Products, and this is one of our specials for this month of December. And we were earlier talking about inclusion, not only inclusive education, but inclusion in all aspects of endeavors, in all aspects of life, as well as undertakings. And we were actually speaking to the proponents and the organizers of a recently concluded convention among student teachers in Negros Oriental for inclusive education. And they are also part of My Idea, which stands for Movement of the Youth for Inclusive Development Through Education in ASEAN. Now, before we went on a break, we were actually talking about how these young people have grounded themselves way back when they were still young, much younger than they are now. They're still very young, but when they were much younger, they actually know what they want. They have identified their priorities, they know their goals, and even now, even after they have graduated and have found themselves in a particular niche in society, they still continued with their advocacy. So we will now go into My Idea, and also the recently concluded convention, which you actually call Spectrum because it is defined as special and inclusive education. Now, okay, let's now define them, and let's try to expound on what happened during the 3-day convention. This involved around 35 student teachers, right? So why student teachers, and why are we starting with them? Would like to answer that?
So we actually started My Idea with the objective of trying to eliminate the stigma against persons with disabilities and children with disabilities by starting with student teachers. Because we acknowledge the crucial role of teachers in the development of a child's education, and trying to statistically and according to research, it's actually backed up that one of the major reasons why children with disabilities who actually enroll in school drop out of school like in the middle of the year, it's because of the teacher factor. The teacher factor, it's because the student teachers don't actually have units in special education. So they don't know how to accommodate a child with disability in the classroom. So that's what we tried to address. We started the first phase of My Idea was going school to school around Negros Oriental, and we conducted workshops in these schools trying to share to them basic knowledge and skills in accommodating children with disabilities in an inclusive classroom. And then after that, we did that for around 4 months, I believe. And then that's when we had the Spectrum, which is this December, like a week ago or a week and a half ago.
Yes. And December 3 actually happens to be the International Day of Persons with Disabilities. And that actually fell on the day that you started the seminar or the workshop, right? At the Negros Oriental State University, I believe?
Actually, we transferred place to place, different venues.
Yes, but the participants were student teachers.
Yeah, all over from Negros Oriental. So we had students from
Norsu, Bayawan, Santa Catalina campus. We have from Canlaon, St. Joseph College, from Bais, from Norsu Bais, Norsu Shatan, and then we also have from Foundation University, St. Paul University, and Negros Oriental State University.
That's good, no? So this is the core 35. What happens after the what happens after the 3-day convention? What will now happen?
Okay, so what we're gonna try to do is during the convention we asked them to make a call to action. So we're still trying to finish the call to action, and we're going to make sort of a book about the whole project from its conception to how we did it. And with this book, we are going to address it to the government and try to make them see, the problem or what we want to happen. And not just in the Philippines or not just with CHED here, but we also want to share this book. That's why in our name, My Idea, it's in ASEAN, because we also have a partner in Vietnam. So we're going to share this book. We want to replicate the project in ASEAN and try to solve this problem.
I understand that while it was going on, Felix, no, your partner in Vietnam also held a similar convention. Is that right?
Yes. Nguyen Kue, she's our partner in Vietnam. She's the ambassador for A World at School. It's a global organization that helps children, especially children with disabilities, to go to school. Now, this is a parallel activity that they held in Vietnam. What's the name of the org? Unbounded Space. Yes, that's the organization. Yes, that's the organization who helped. But they are still members of My Idea. And then on that similar day, they also held similar activities, the same module as the Philippine counterpart, but of course in Vietnamese na language. Pero the goal is still the same. We allow student teachers to be more open-minded when it comes to inclusive education, since basically when before we had this conversation, I told you that most student teachers also are not for inclusive education. Most of them are for special education, but not only for practicality, but also for on the moral aspect of special education. The government nowadays spend most of its budget in creating schools. Now, if there is a school for special and special education only, these students who can be supposed to be accommodated in a regular classroom would oblige themselves to go to special education classrooms, which are probably in far-flung areas or areas that's not near in their houses. That also is applicable in Vietnam, since nag-K-12 man po si Vietnam. So our goal is like to give background muna what inclusive education is to student teachers, and then compact it with advocacy building. So we invited speakers from the GEFI, the United Nations Youth Advocacy Group. Kuya Rolando is part of it.
Exactly,
so we invited them on how they come up with their different advocacies. We have 2 international speakers via Skype. And then
I was about to ask that. Yes. So via Skype, you were able to accommodate them through Skype.
Yes,
wow,
2 members of the Youth Advocacy Group.
Yes.
Of the United Nations.
Did Kuya Junjun also speak to the group?
Yeah, he's also part of it. Yes.
Perfect. Yes.
We have one from Sri Lanka and one from it's Serbia and Herzegovina.
Okay.
So practically, the event is somehow international in a sense that it major activities are conducted in Philippines and Vietnam, but we have included activities which are also conducted by people from the United Nations and people who are also from the IRI. It's the government agency in the United States, International Republican Institute, that supervises the entire program of My Idea.
Good. Before I go to Felix, may I just ask if the participants in Vietnam, which was also a parallel session, were they also education students? Student teachers also. You really said, you also said that you are starting out with student teachers, because I think this is really the core group, no, that should be exposed to inclusive education. So we start with the school. Yeah. Felix, you would like to add something?
I just want to add with what Kate has said earlier that we would like to expound why we have the formation of the call to action, because the Department of Education is mandating all schools should accept children regardless of their disabilities. And the problem is that not all teachers way back in college were trained to handle students or to cater students with disabilities. So we see it as a problem. That is why we go from one school to another to school around Negros Oriental, conducting workshops, giving them basic knowledge of handling children with disabilities. And that is why we are having the formation of the call to action, because we want the Commission on Higher Education to know that the existing problem that we have with our system.
I'm just curious, aside from some teachers, if not all, maybe some, or most teachers, I should say, are not trained for inclusive education. What are some other reasons why they may not be too accepting of the fact that children with disabilities may join their so-called regular classroom? What are some other reasons?
I think it also goes down with their perception of the disability. they're not trained with the skills or with the strategies on how to accommodate the child. But more than that, they're not aware of what the child's disability is. They're not aware of what the disabilities is. So they don't know. That's why if you don't know the nature of the disability, you don't know how to accommodate it, and you don't know, so what are the limitations of this disability, and what can this child do despite his disability. So let's say, for example, yes, a child with ADHD. So, a lot of teachers don't know how to handle it because first and foremost, they don't know what the disability is, what ADHD is. So, what we tried to really teach them during the inclusion caravans was, I'll give it to Felix because he's in charge of this part. So I know he can explain it very well.
He's the medical person. Yes, exactly.
We are trying to inform them of the classifications of disability. Example, a child with ADHD and how to handle them, because it's really difficult to handle a child with ADHD in the classroom. He will throw anything to everyone, so it will disturb the entire classroom. So what we do, we give them basic knowledge on how to handle. Example, how would you give a 100-item exam to a child with ADHD whose attention span is 5 minutes.
Oh my God.
5 minutes rather. So those things we inform them on how to handle. Example for that particular situation, the child has to answer it within 5 minutes. So 5 items for 5 minutes. So one minute for one item. And after 5 minutes, since his attention span is 5 minutes, he will go around. Okay, you sige dagan sa dong dula sa play, and then you come back and answer again 6 to 10.
So in other words, dealing with X number of students, in the schools that you had actually visited, how many students are there in one classroom?
In public schools?
On the average, yes, in public schools.
On the average, like 1:40 or 1:50.
So one teacher against 40 students.
Yes, or 30 to 40.
30.
It depends on the school.
Also on the year level.
Yes, on the year level.
Or on the grade level,
yes,
I suppose.
Yes.
No? So for example, if teacher A has around 40 students, you put a child with disability, how many children with disability can you accommodate in one classroom? I wonder if they were able to put one and one together in certain schools. Do they have a quota or something?
In certain schools in Dumaguete, I'm not really familiar with, but I am a school nurse in DepEd. Yes. So as I have observed, we have children with disabilities, but there are 3 or 4 in one of my schools. Two children with disability, which is cerebral palsy. They were put different classrooms. So this certain child is being put in one section and the other section.
So not all children with disabilities having the same disability, for that matter, would be placed in one classroom.
Yes, because it would be very difficult for the teacher
Definitely, yes.
I'd like to add, it depends on the arrangement of the principal and the teachers involved. My mother is also in the secondary education school, and then
a public school
teacher, yes. And she told me that if they have children with disabilities in their classroom, teachers would divide. For example, if she can accommodate such, or if that teacher has the ability to handle a child with a disability, for a particular child with disability. But since K-12 is coming, K-12 is here, anyone should be in a regular classroom. Anyone should be enrolled in a regular classroom, accommodated in a regular classroom. Now that's what my idea is trying to do. Most teachers would see what they're doing as special education, but it's actually special education is actually like basic strategies on what to do with children with disabilities, and then how to how would these children overcome in the future when it comes to their limitations because of their disability. But with inclusive education at hand, teachers they don't have knowledge on what to do with the child, but with the idea that this child has to go to school, this child has to graduate, this child has to earn earn something in the future. That's the start of how inclusive education works. It's not actually about interventions. It's not actually about strategies, but inclusive education on a macro level, it's your personal, the teacher's personal view on children with disabilities.
So that's the difference between special education and inclusive education. Whereas special education actually deals with basic strategies, right, on what to do. And in fact, we offer, at least in Dumaguete, the schools offer something like a major, right,
Yes.
in special education. But that is not exactly dealing with children with disabilities. Am I correct?
It's actually dealing with children with disabilities, ma'am,
Also.
for special education.
No, special education is only dealing with children with
With
disabilities.
disabilities.
Yes.
Oh.
Yeah, that's so that
Okay.
to put a clear difference between special and inclusive education. Special education deals with children with disabilities, and when you say inclusive education, it's education for all, wherein the child, despite his disability, despite his ethnicity, despite his religion, his race, is included in the classroom with other children. So that is the meaning of the universal definition of inclusive education.
Oh, thus, earlier on during the show, we were talking about inclusion, right? So not only in terms of education, not only in terms of a particular field, or whatever it may be, but in practically all aspects, as you had mentioned, no? Ethnicity, religion, and of course, disability. Okay, but I'd like to ask, no, where are we now in this particular effort to implement or to embrace inclusive education in Negros Oriental? We don't really need to go into statistics, but like Felix, after all, you are exposed in the Department of Education. How accepting are our schools in accommodating?
In Dumaguete City, we are very happy to say that the division of Dumaguete is really accepting children with disability. They are being mixed with regular pupils in school. So, we can really say that in Dumaguete we are moving towards inclusion.
Very good. Yeah, Kate, you want to add something?
And yeah, I think, Dumaguete deserves or Negros Oriental, even if we just sort of started a few years ago,
Yeah, okay.
but we can see the progress. I mean, in our schools, even in college, in St. Paul, there's person with blindness who goes to school, who actually aces his exams. We have the same situation in Norsu, and I believe also like in Siliman. Yeah,
we have a blind student.
Yeah.
Blind student.
But I think when it comes to children in elementary or in high school, even if we can see it now in Negros Oriental, I think the thing that we should also look into now is the progress. I mean, yes, they're accepted in school, but are they learning? Or are they progressing? So I think that's also one angle we have to look into.
So in other words, now that these children with disabilities, as a matter of fact, no, have been accepted in the regular schools, yes, you're correct, no? How far is their progress? Are they really learning? Now, I'm also curious, how about the parents of these children with disabilities? How are they accepting of the fact that their children can now be mixed with regular students? Or is there still a caution, para bang, a sense of, parang holding back, parang I should be cautious because my child has a disability? I think that is part of our culture now, no? Yeah.
I think in Dumaguete, because of probably with strong, with people who have been advocating for PWD, these parents are actually really empowered in Dumaguete. I can, generally speaking, I can say that they're empowered because you can see them sending their pupils not in SPED, but in the regular classroom.
And I think our parents whose children may have disabilities have also formed themselves into an organization or an association. And isn't it that there is really power in numbers, right? Yeah, that's really, really great. Yeah, Edward.
Yeah, so I'd like to add kasi, yes, there is reluctance with parents because of course they would know that there's bullying that would happen in classrooms,
That's
especially.
another problem.
That's the role of the teacher. Now, the role of the teacher comes in first, the parent, the teacher orients the parent na she can handle this, she can handle the bullying part in learning institutions. Of course, it's inevitable for children with disabilities to be bullied, especially with our culture as Filipinos. So we sometimes see jokes as not disabilities of people as jokes aren't offensive. But there's still reluctance with parents. But it's timing for my idea to form such an organization. We have formed not because we have to do policing power or we have to rally for the cause. We're here to affirm the existing condition of, or the existing ideas of people on what inclusivity is. We are not here to become another redundant organization, but to perform like feeding program or a dole-out organization to train parents. We're here to affirm this existing idea.
In other words, you recognize the fact
Yes.
that this is a problem, no? If I
Yes.
may call it as such, it's a challenge,
Yes.
and it exists.
Yes.
And there is something that can be done about it. no?
Yes, and
Yeah.
we focus particularly on the youth since although there are existing laws that are in Negros Oriental, our public officials, our school officials are doing something about this. But there is another perspective seen by the youth, which is somehow we see as a niche by my idea. It's because we are youths and teachers are budding teachers are youth also, and we also deal with children. So there's a touch of our generation towards involving them. Like for example, how we deal with bullying in social media, for example, or how do we cope with children? We talk to children with disabilities, for that matter.
Where does that, before we end our show, where does the Magna Carta for persons with disabilities come in here? Very, very quickly. There's an existing Magna Carta already, but how can it actually connect with my idea? Yeah, Kate.
Well, I think it always goes down to education. I mean, it is the right of, especially since we're focusing on, rights of children with disabilities and youth with disabilities who want to go to school. The Magna Carta comes in because it's their right, and it's something that, we can't deprive them of, especially if they want to learn and they want to go to school. So it's not just, that's why we always say it starts with education. And like what I said a while ago during commercial break, once we start with education as early as a child is exposed to a child who's just a bit different from him, but let's say physically, but when you start an interaction with kids, and I think this is the start. This is a start of an inclusive society. That's why we say an inclusive classroom, an inclusive education is the start of an inclusive society.
And you have to start somewhere, right? Yeah. And my idea, the spectrum that you just held, especially on the International Day of Persons with Disabilities, I think that was such an opportune time, no, for people to once again. I'm not saying that people are not yet aware, no. We are aware, but I think we always need to be reminded, right? And to have people like you guys working for something and really believing in what you're doing. I can sense the passion in each one of you. So because again, we're running out of time. Can you imagine? It has been about an hour. Yeah, very, very fast. I can allow all of you guys to maybe say in maybe one sentence or two the call of action. Maybe not really all of it, but perhaps to make our televiewers once again, not really aware, but maybe cognizant of the fact that Christmas, because after all this is Christmas, maybe they can do something for our children with disabilities or our persons with disabilities in their own little way. After all this is Christmas time, and of course all onwards, no? Not only during Christmas. Maybe starting off with Edward and then onwards to Felix.
Well, I'd like to say that whether you have a disability or not, or you're not diagnosed with a disability, all of us are people. We have the same basic rights. We are persons with disabilities are as much people as we are. That's why the main idea that I can say to our televiewers, especially those who are children with disabilities, is that harmony among all people comes from our personal idea of inclusion, and then it creates a slide towards other people that includes us, and then that idea creates another slide towards the stakeholders of the community, and that is all of us.
Yeah, wow. And then Kate?
I think once we acknowledge each and everyone's differences and each and everyone's different perspective, different everyone's individuality, I think that's when we can create respect among each other, and that's how we can create a very inclusive community.
Wow, very well said as well. Yeah, Felix.
I just want to say that let's help each other because at the end of the day, we need each other. Yes. So for that, we say yes to inclusion.
That's your battle cry, yes to inclusion. Wow. Can you imagine? That's really a very nice way of putting it across, especially that it is Christmas time. No? It's time to share our blessings with one another, but not only during Christmas, but in fact forever and always, right? Yeah. So with that, friends, we once again bring to a close another live episode of Thursday Night Chat. Once again, we'd like to thank Phil Products for this plaque of appreciation on the occasion of their 25th anniversary. And since this is Christmas time, we'd like to once again greet our televiewers a very Merry Christmas. In a few days, can you imagine? In a few days, we shall be celebrating Christmas, and we look forward to another prosperous 2016. And if you have time, please read the latest edition of Island News. We come out every Sunday here in Negros Oriental. I'd like to once again thank Wow Them Boutique for dressing me up tonight. I am in red because it's Christmas time. And yes, Merry Christmas to all of you guys. Yes, and onwards to your advocacy. Yes, so good night, everyone. And we hope we shall have a blessed Christmas and another blessed New Year. Thank you very much.
And all you're wearing is your shoes. You got soul, you know what to do to turn me on until I write a song about you. And you have your own engaging style, and you've got the knack to vivify. And you make my slacks a little tight. You may unfasten them if you like. That if you crash and spend the night, but you don't.